All right, guys, welcome back. Chris J Snook here with ChrisJSnook.Live. Oh my goodness, that is one of the best book covers I've ever seen. I can't wait to talk with my friend Jeanne Bliss today. What Would Your Mother Do is her recent book. She is, in my opinion, but that doesn't matter, because if you document this, the word customer experience is this kind of spicy buzzword, as she says, of today. But the reality is we are now on with what many believe to be the godmother of customer experience in this movement. And so welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to tell people how they can actually operationalize this, because that's the big thing, right?
Hey, Chris. Yeah. I have a new word for you in a second, but yeah, it's we have to make it real. To make it about the business. Yeah.
So let's dive in. You've written several books. We first met years ago. I think 2011, 2012. You were bringing out a book called "I Love You More Than My Dog."
Right, now a dog book and a mom book, right?
Yeah, you got a mom book.
Yeah, here's the dog book. Here's the dog book.
And in between that, you went for the left brain kind of analytical person with Chief Customer Officer 2.0, which is another phenomenal one.
Yeah, I did. So what's interesting is in 2006, I published Chief Customer Officer, and it was the first book of its kind. It was the first book to talk about the role of leading this work, engaging with organizations. And I had to convince the publisher to name it that. They wanted to call it customer ownership. I'm like, no, that is the antithesis of what this is, because they were convinced that I would sell 5 books, right? That 5 people in the world would think about it. And it went crazy. It was like being shot out of a cannon, because everybody there was no name for it. There's no framework for it or whatever. And so I redid the book in 2015 because the world had changed so much. We had social media. We'd gone through a downturn. We were finally getting it at the C-suite level that this is about growth. Think about it this way. The mom book and the dog book are the beacon and the inspiration of the kind of company you are to become, and the behaviors that create admiration. The CCO books are how to unite and arm wrestle the silos to get there. It's how to.
I think all of them, and I think because you need, why I wanted to have you on is we haven't chatted in a while, but I think we're at that time where now it's been a thing, right? I don't know, for the last 4 or 5 years. Our Travis and my book, which we wrote extensively about you in Digital Sense, came out in 2017, and so customer experience has been this kind of thing now that's. It was the buzzword, it was the hype thing, and yet we still have companies that maybe intend to do better, but just aren't doing well delivering it. So I think it really harkens back to the CCO books that you wrote, because there is pure gold in those hills, of tools and frameworks and things that you've proven. These aren't things that might work.
These are weather tested. I spent 25 years as a practitioner, but since 2002, I have been coaching people using these tools and sharpening them. And my clients are the biggest enterprise companies in the world. But what we find is the middle companies and startups are using these as well. But these are field tested, field proven, iterated, and they work. But it takes breaking it into bite-sized pieces, and it takes engaging the leaders.
So the time to do this was then, but many people are still wondering how they can do it now, how they allocate budget. So the purpose of today is really to try and illuminate your vantage point from today, 2019. We've had 10, you could argue almost 11 years of no winter in the business cycle. We are due for winter. Now, we could debate. It doesn't matter what we think it's going to be, whether it's another recession, whether it's a dip, whether it's a depression, it doesn't matter. The point is, business has been, up and to the right, at least at the market level. And yet we've also had more bankruptcies in the retail sector, because these business models of yesteryear, industrial, these product-centric business models have been exposed. And so we're still going to sort out the ones that haven't been exposed or died yet. But the reality is that operationalizing this, if I'm putting capital into things, buying these things out at a discount, whether it be Sears or restructuring, whatever, I've got to change the way they do business fundamentally. And so it's not about a buzzword anymore. It's about, we have a customer-centric business that you've been talking about for 20 something years, it's different than a product centric business model. How do we actually reorganize ourselves to deliver that? And that starts with culture, but it also, then it has to go into like actual heavy lifting, right?
Right. Well, yeah. And that's why the word I want to introduce is a goofy word, but it's like leaderizing it, because if we don't start with what we're delivering, right? Why are we in business, and what are we doing to improve, to make customers' lives better from a B2B standpoint or a B2C standpoint? Now, that's not a pie in the sky purpose statement, mission. It's these are the 5 goals our customers have, and here is why we're here and how we then need to translate our business, our operating, and our behavior model into delivering those goals. Everybody talks about journey mapping. I'm simplifying it now to say, look, find the goals. What are they trying to accomplish? How would they, when they're articulating success, what will they have been able to do? A, B, C, D. So that's the first thing, is simplify it and translate the work of the business to customers' goals. The second thing is, you really need to be deliberate about what you will do and what you won't do.
Right.
And that has to start with leadership, because what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you will not do as you're helping customers achieve goals? You will not create a situation where you're upcharging and adding extra fees that create complexity. You will not put your people in a position of doing whatever. You will not make promises that you can't deliver on. But we're not creating the frame of what our behavioral models should be as we operationalize it. Now, here's the thing that I want to say, and I'll put it in context with the Mom Book, is nobody goes to work thinking I'm going to make it hard on the customer.
Right.
Companies are built of good people working really hard. So moms benefited out to all of this. But as we're working, again, this is the constant over and over, as we're working separately, we're inadvertently creating the complexity and we're creating the black holes. And because we're not united and starting with the goals, we're executing against individual KPIs, which is the age-old reason that this is failing or being moderate in its success.
Well, and a lot of times, and by the way, guys, so if you're putting questions into the chat or comments, please do that in real time, and then I'll be monitoring that, and I'll bring those up for Jeanne to make this as relevant to your concerns or your kind of feedback as we can. So thanks for tuning in, and as you do that, we'll get to those. So feel free to fire away in there.
Fire away.
So one of the things that you just mentioned was, this management of KPIs and this accountability to KPIs. Mm-hmm. Again, it really is, as trite as it sounds, it really comes back to, one of the things you wrote about, I think it was in the CCO 2.0 book. It was probably in the first one too, but I know for sure it was in the second one, was the customer is the asset, and the is the key thing, right? So in other words, if you top down it and you have CEO down buy-in, and even in some cases maybe board level buy-in, that the customer is our asset, because we talk with banks, we talk with every vertical that's out there, retail. There's no product that I could invent today that couldn't be commoditized in 24 hours by everyone that wants to compete with me, right? It is there's 5 places that make 90% of the stuff, and they're all in China, right? So it's like there's not too many business models. Maybe you could argue drugs and drug delivery or things like that, where there's heavy patents and things like that. But there's not too many business models today that can't be disrupted tomorrow by a competitor. And a lot of these legacy business models, including banks, have had their best profit centers, their best products, cannibalized by people that don't have their regulatory frameworks, like fintechs and things like that. So,
and what's interesting is I just interviewed a guy who wrote a great book coming out. Actually, I think it's in February, about disruption and where disruption is occurring. Disruption is occurring. These people who are disrupting, to your point, Chris Howard, aren't disrupting. They don't want to recreate banking. Right. They want to disrupt the pain points of banking and get really good at a single area where customers are being overcharged or service feed to death. and give you an option to take that portion of the experience away from traditional banking or away from traditional healthcare.
Or
and
retail,
they have
or whatever it is.
Yeah, they have the advantage because they're working on a miniature portion of the experience and pulling clients away and giving customers the view of saying, we don't have to take this anymore.
Well, and so what's interesting is if you look at the macro why, right? If I'm capital, so I have a fund, I'm capital in a lot of these scenarios. Capital likes those deals because they're very simple to the point of anti-complexity. We're going to go after this pain point because this pain point is X billions or X hundred millions.
That's right.
We're going to be customer focused, top down. We're going to build it from scratch. In other words, we're going to go attack this vertical. We're going to steal all this market share away from the incumbents, and then we're going to sell it to someone who competes with them or sell it back to them. Now, here's the challenge. If you think about customer and you think about longevity, what we will and won't do, in order to scale, so in order to return that capital, I've got to grow, I've got to scale, and then there has to be some kind of liquidity event. The challenge is if I get absorbed back into a bigger enterprise that does not share that same hierarchical redesign,
right? Well, and it gets lost later. It gets absorbed back into the complexity.
Yep.
And it may not be sustainable. And so that's why this ability to understand inside of your own organization the places where you're making it difficult to do business initially or not as great as it could be, and being brave enough to rethink it and simplify it starts to put a wall around those incoming, disruptors. But that's really hard to do because what you'll notice is where the disruption is happening is in the very big legacy businesses that have a very hard time changing. Banking, retail, hospitality, financial services, insurance, we're getting disruptors. And that's why this work has to start with leaders clearing the path and being brave enough to say, we're willing to break this thing and rebuild it in a new version. And that's hard work. And what's happened instead, as you know, is in a very well-intended way, we're saying to the organization, okay, experience is our thing. Everybody start an experience project that's connected to your area. And so we're inadvertently actually making the isolated or the separated experience exacerbated because the customer doesn't want to do one thing. They want something that can be completed in its totality.
Yeah.
And
So I for those who listen, I'm putting a quick poll out there just for Jeanne and my sake, so we kind of understand live who's listening to this. Obviously, we'll have a mix of folks, but if you have a chance, just throw an answer in there in the next 30 seconds. So if you're a CX executive or similar in a larger enterprise, which we're saying $1 billion plus, if you're one in an SME, 10 to 500 million or 10 to million, and then if you're an other. And so I see that right now the early returns we have a lot of others. So feel free to throw in the chat something that says whether you're a founder. It looks like now we're about 50-50 in CX executives, large enterprise, or other. So for those who are other, tell us whether you're a marketer, whether you're a CFO, whether you're, just put that in the chat so that if you don't mind, just so we kind of understand and we can angle this a little bit more for you. So we'll leave that up for a couple more seconds and then we'll kind of go from there. But we have a mix. So we have a mix of other, which is people that obviously care enough about customer experience to be on here and try and understand how to operationalize that. I would assume that's either capital or that's that's a founder looking to be this disruptive thing, but not be unsustainable. And then the rest are in billion-dollar enterprises, which is your sweet spot. People that you've helped that have real silos and have real challenges. Mm-hmm. So let's just focus on let's just pick a target. Let's just say we're talking about a $1 billion plus division or a business unit. And they've committed, so they've gotten buy-in. Because I know that a lot of the people in those kind of things have gotten some level of buy-in. Maybe there's a shared ownership. There's a working committee of cross-functional team that has been dedicated to say, how do XYZ put the customer in the center of our business?
Yep.
Step one, step two. If you gave them your recipe and, in a couple of simple steps they could take away today and go, all right, here's where we're going to go. Here's where we can find resources. Let's start at the very basic level. Like, what's the first thing that a best practice company would do if they've got the go ahead, but they haven't succeeded yet, and they're looking for a way to save it or to do it right?
Sure. So, and again, the order maybe can change, but step one, you have to create a common language so that people have, I call it a one version of the truth, one shopping mall map of, here are the 5 major goals that our customers have that if we don't deliver on them, value will erode. We have to deliver here, we have to deliver here, we have to deliver here. And here's the conditions that drive value erosion. Here's where we are today. We have to get agreement on where we are today. And that means people have to check their egos and their silos at the door to agree. Because this falls apart when every leader is defining or deciding or throwing out a hand what's been presented or told or whatever. So if you don't have united agreement on the goals and where you are today, the messaging is going to implode and you're going to go back to everybody working on their own thing. So that's number one. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And so I don't want this to seem like a shameless plug, but the reason why we wrote about your work extensively in Digital Sense, Travis and I, was because the one problem that we felt we could do a really good job attacking was that picture, right? So, for those, you have a bunch of tools too, but for those who are looking at how to complement, what we've written about in Digital Sense with you, your stuff goes deep on the tool sets. Your stuff goes like, and we don't deal with that. What we said was, we're going to show people how to have a common language, experience marketing framework. What is our picture when we say customer experience inside this enterprise? Right. And that's all we tried to do, is give people a common framework so that when they said customer experience, they all saw the same thing.
Well, yeah, and I agree. Yeah, and I would even say, because where we're getting problems even on that is when we're presenting the experience too complex. Here are the 14 stages of our journey, and we have 200 touch points, and people's eyes roll in the back of their head. So that's why, sometimes these things, in a very well-intended way, we wrap lingo around them, but the lingo doesn't connect to the operation, and the leaders can't see how this is going to advance the business of the business.
Right.
And so
first thing is get a common language.
Language, and
however you do it, get a common language.
Common language, but make the language simple.
Yep.
And make it about the connection to the business and to value. Customer value, value erosion. I call it sometimes a defector pipeline. But don't try to tell the whole story at once of everything. Just make it. That's why I say to people, just identify the goals and get people to agree, and get people to, the second thing is get people to agree on where you are today. Because there's lots of pride in those hills of the great work we've done, and we're hitting our KPIs, but we're hitting our KPIs that aren't connected to the customer's true experience. And so often we have to do, I call it the Vulcan mind meld, where we bring customers in and we have customers talk about how well they're able to accomplish their goals. And or we have leaders read quotes from customers that we've organized by goals. And then we put up butcher paper by each goal or stage, whatever you want to call it, and get leaders and groups to rate where the company is today on the ability for the customer to achieve that goal. 100% reliable. Nah, you never know. Or it's still a struggle because we've got so much complexity in it, or so many people's hands in the pie. If you don't get agreement on where you are today, you're not going to get agreement on, we have to do work on this and we need your people involved in this.
Well, I think so. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, but I don't think you're gonna mind. One of the takeaways that jumped out at me from some of your work is this notion of customer, the first customer, right? And the first customer is the actual employee, teammate, what have you.
The intern, what's on the inside shows up on the outside.
The internal stakeholder. And most people don't think about that. They think about the external customer we're looking to solve problems for. So when you say customer goals, okay, great. I need to understand what my end customer goals are. But the person that is delivering the operation that's going to meet that is my first customer. And that goes back to your heavy kind of, I think, recommend that if this isn't top down, if this isn't culturally in the DNA, what we will and won't do, if this isn't, then people are just doing a job to level up, to get hired by the competitor, to get another better job in CX. So
yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, this is my anecdotal experiences when I've been to conferences. I've spoken at Oracle Modern CX, and it's a bunch of people with a big title that are doing enough work at wherever they are so that they can then network to go get a better paying job at another company. And the problem is that there's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature.
I wouldn't define CX leaders as that, though, quite honestly.
No, I'm just saying that it's hard in enterprise, I think, if you don't have a very, very clear, simple message of why.
It gets diluted. It gets diluted. So it gets diluted, and it's not, the work isn't really done at a fundamental, comprehensive experience way where the customer can see a difference.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have a client, they've been working for a couple years before I got involved with them, and it was a commitment. Everybody committed, and what happened was two things, and this is very common. Number one, a lot of existing projects got relabeled customer experience.
Yep.
Again, this is well intended. This is well intended, but if the starting point of the project wasn't the right starting point in the first place from a customer standpoint, and rewiring it, relabeling it experience is going to get, again, a false positive, because what's happening is we're defining commitment as actions, not behavior change that the customer sees necessarily. So let me tell you the second thing. Let me tell you the second thing. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
That's okay.
The second thing is then a proliferation of new projects came on the boards that were, in a very well-intended way, meant to be experience projects, but they were either by silo or weren't the development of human-centered design or redesign or the very deliberate way of rethinking the experience and rebuilding. Those tools didn't reside inside the organization. And so inadvertently, the redesign became internal-based or silo-based. And so that's what's given, and that's where leaders are like, we're focused and committed. Look at all this stuff we're doing.
Right.
And then you go back and ask the customers and say, hey, we know you've been working on this for 14 months or 18 months or 2 years, but I'm not seeing a difference. And that's not uncommon.
So those are two really great common things, I think, that you've identified.
Yeah.
What is the assessment tool, or what is the resource that would allow someone who said, yeah, we've got that going on right now, listening to this, to say, here is I don't want to call it a diagnostic, but like, here's a way to rank whether these old projects should or should not be relabeled experience. And then number two, whether these new projects are going to clog the pipe and end up in silos because like, how do you assess where to prioritize? What is your methodology to help companies sort those two dynamics?
Sure. Yeah. Well, what's interesting, and again, I just want to say people are really trying. People are really trying. They are. They're doing body slams and making financial commitments. So one of the things we've done, and I know a lot of people, you guys have done this a bunch of times. If you have, what's usually done though is the projects are still being presented and organized by silo. Instead, take as much as you can. It's painful. Identify all the work being done or the work that's connected, and line it up under the customer goals. To see,
so reassign it, take it out of a silo and attach it to customer goals.
Just matrix it to see what's working. What is that project? What are you trying to do with that project? What's the starting point? How many people are working on that same thing separately? And that's not about finger pointing or any of that. It's just to say, we got to know we're exhausted. We're doing a lot of work, but why isn't this getting us any traction? The second thing then you need to do is really do some ethnography. You know, my friends at St. Jude are taking it to the point of doing anthropology in the way that you talk to customers, watch them interacting with what you do, to get a simpler, clearer, this point in time, here's the experience, here's what's happening. And again, don't make it across every touch point. Pick 2 or 3 things initially, because what you're doing is engine building or methodology building. Focus, do it, prove it. Because what we're trying to do is teach the organization a new way of agreeing, a new way of assessing, and a new way of rebuilding. And we can't do that. And that's the other thing. You know, people say, oh, we're working on 15 touch points. Wow.
Right.
You know, and one of them is the billing system that's been broken for 15 years and includes, you know, the alignment of 15 computer legacy practices. It's just where we put too much on top of ourselves as well. Pick one thing where your customers have talked about it for years and years and years and really fix it, but really create, as I mentioned, understanding, assessing, and rebuilding, and then prove that it works organizationally, in the underbelly of how people come together, in validating with customers that it improved their life, and in marketing hope back to customers and the organization.
Let me ask you this question. I get this question a lot, and I'm curious your answer. If CX had to live as a discipline or be led by 1 or 2 silos, what are the best 2 that are the most important that can either make it succeed or fail? For instance, marketing is kind of where I think a lot of people thought about CX for a while as a silo or a domain. But the reality is that every company now, regardless of what they sell, is essentially a software company with integrations. So IT or, you know, CIO is a big piece of this puzzle. And then you could also argue operations or FinOps, financial and operations is an important piece, because again, there's only one checkbook at the end of the day, but these budgets have to be reality. So in your perspective, if you had to get buy-in from 1 or 2 domains that could make or break operationalizing this a success, who has to be on board and who should lead?
Yeah, so the word ownership, I think, needs to be kiboshed around this customer thing. There's no part of the organization that owns the customer experience. The role of, whether you call it CX or whatever, it's really robust collaboration and change management. Whatever you call it, as much as you can have it report to Switzerland, you know, the CEO or the some other part of the organization, that's the most ideal situation, because when you come at it from a silo, it can often be looked at as at a land grab. However, I've seen it where it's successfully run from a silo, but, and I'm going to answer your question in a minute, but I want to address this first.
Sure.
The best leaders who are good at uniting, because that's really what this is creating a comprehensive understanding of the whole, so that we now are informed about how to break it into its pieces and rebuild. They have run a successful operation. They are mature leaders. They don't need this to ratchet themselves up the flagpole. And they are collaborative leaders who can check their ego at the door and recognize that the work that they're doing is about shining a spotlight on others. So, for example, I just did a really great podcast with a SaaS leader, the guy who he first led support, worldwide support, and has just then added the chief customer officer role at Box. It's a huge corporation, 60,000 employees. He's successful because he was recognized and admired operations guy. He got stuff done. He's a mature leader. He can enable people to do good work, inspire employees, and he's an evolved person and a collaborative partner inside of the organization. So in that example, and listen to that podcast, by the way, these podcasts are so fantastic because they're real people doing the real work.
This is the Human Duct Tape, right? This is your podcast?
Yeah, this is my Chief Customer Officer, Human Duct Tape show. He can be successful because he's got the credibility. It's not about him. He knows it's not about him. Now, he does have the customer success organization reporting to him, but the rest of the organization recognizes that he is partnering with them to do the uniting work. So, you know, if you already own a function, that's fine, as long as you have, besides your ability to kick ass on running a function, is your ability to be collaborative. You're a mature leader, and you recognize that this is not about just your function. That happens to be something you run. You need a good lieutenant running that, but your larger purpose is uniting the organization to have a common agreement on, again, the current state, how you assess, how you define, how you rebuild.
So that actually plays right into a chat question that we have, and your earlier word about leaderize, which leaderize,
like that word.
to lead from how I interpret that is you're saying empower people with tools so that they can lead from wherever they are inside the organization. So Anne has in the poll said she's a CX manager, not executive level, CX manager.
Hey, Anne, nice to see you.
Inside of $1 billion enterprise. And her question is, I'm curious, Jeanne, when you talk about the 5 goals versus journey mapping, how do you get to the goals if you don't define the journey and discover the root cause of the fail points? Second part is, I like the simplicity of the goals. However, I question if customers really think that deeply about their goals. It seems journey mapping is a tool to uncover the pain points, which can lead to clearly defining the goals.
Yeah. No, Anne, you're exactly right. You get to the goals from all the hard journey mapping work.
Right. You're not saying don't do it. You're saying
no. Sorry. Sometimes sometimes my Italianness comes out and I sound too absolute. No, I'm not throwing the journey mapping out with the bathwater. All I'm saying is that sometimes the outcome of journey mapping is so much data and information that we're overwhelming. And you're right, Anne. You can't say to a customer, what's your goal? That's why we're seeing that. And again, I don't hate surveys. I'm just telling you, when we ask a customer an A or a B question, we're boxing them into the current state. So as we take on anthropology and ethnography and other ways of observing and understanding, we will learn 2 things: what's really important and where we need to learn to innovate and rebuild to even deliver reliability, more importantly. Because what we're going to find is those make or break moments where value erosion occurs if we're not delivering. And when we can, what happens, here's the difference. Think about it this way. Journey mapping is great. We're excited and we want to present it. Our job is to continue to synthesize after that and to tell a story that our leaders are going to absorb and accept and desire. And so think about it. You're doing the journey map. Now, how are you going to organize it to get their engagement and galvanize people? And that's why we're finding that breaking it into goals or customer missions, that you can say go by stage of the journey or whatever, or, and that's why even when we redefine the names of the stages, it's what the customer is trying to accomplish versus our process step. So it all gets you there, if that makes sense. But great question, Anne. I'm glad you asked that, because you're right. I'm not trying to say, no, don't do journey mapping. Just our job has got to be to synthesize it, to make it about business and an operation and something leaders click into.
Right. And, and when we speak about it in our language, we kind of say something similar, which is, start with who do we exist to serve and why. That's the top level question. Then it's, when you look at the journey map, you look at comparative to your competitive landscape, which pain points are causing you the most attrition or loss, right? So if I solve this, if I throw my scope, which is always going to be limited, capital, resources, time, if I can calibrate my scope to the 2 or 3 touch points or the customer goals that matter, then I can take all that data that comes out of the journey map, but I can say, okay, for the next 12 months, we're going to go all in on these 2 or 3.
Yeah, and
because
prove
then
it.
You can actually build, right? If you can solve that, you unlock delta, and then you can use that proof point to reinvest in solving the others.
That's right. And again, what we're trying to teach is a repeatable approach where we're going to do at the meta level of the big gnarly things it takes the whole company to work on. Because if, building 5 versions of a billing system doesn't make any sense, or building 5 versions of onboarding doesn't make any sense. But then the future is disengaging from a huge centralized approach to it, except for the big things, and embedding those skills from a decentralized standpoint back into the organization. And that's why, Chris, for example, what we're also building in are rotating in people that participate in these projects. But here's the difference. And Anne, this is important for you and others out there who have identified the pain points that you need to build a project team on. One of the big challenges has been that, okay, we've identified the pain point. Now we're going out from where we are to try to get people to be on these teams. They've already got a full docket of projects and KPIs they're responsible for. Flip that. Don't you identify the pain points. Make sure your storytelling gets your leaders to identify those things, and then have your leaders identify their highest performing people who will now be on that team with you. Because now what you've done is you've done what this job really should be, which is to organize and illuminate and put people in a position to make a decision. And then also give them the vote and the decision on who of their people are going to be on. So now there's a complete difference in the team when you've asked them to be on versus their bosses tapped them and said, hey, this is an important project. I voted for you to be on.
They're opting in versus being pushed in.
Well, yeah, and we've been going around being, beggars a little bit inside the organization. Please come to my meeting. Please be on my project. And that's because our passion drives us to want to do this work. But without that loop, we will continue to be at that kind of beggar level. And that's not about who we are as people. It's just what we've inadvertently put ourselves in a position to be.
So it looks like you answered her question. She said, thanks for the clarification. That makes a lot
of sense. You're welcome.
Good job. All right, we got a couple minutes left. I want to shift gears and touch on something that we were talking about in the green room earlier, which relates to, let's call it the signal versus the noise. But as it relates to customer experience and a lot of this work, we've already talked at length about journey mapping, but all these different, I don't want to call them solution providers, but thought leaders and things. There's an interesting dynamic that's happened, like it always does around these kind of movements, where a lot of companies, I think, have trouble even figuring out who they should listen to. Right? Or there's been a lot of people that have done a great job at branding themselves at one level of it, but maybe they don't really have the experience, no fault of their own, maybe just haven't been doing it long enough, or the data to support the tools or the tactics they're recommending actually operationalizing it. So again, from your perspective, what is your course for 2019? What is your, how do you separate yourself from that, without really focusing on it? And how do you, what are some of the challenges you face communicating to leaders and things like that?
Well, I've been doing this work for 35 years. I held the chief customer officer role about 4 or 5 times. I've coached over 150,000 leaders around the world. I've given over 1,500 keynote speeches. I've written 4 best-selling books on it, and I'm the co-founder of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. I feel like I've done the work not only from the standpoint of 25 years of pushing the rock up the hill. I always tell people I'm 5'0" because the rock's falling on my head so much. But, I'm a giver, and my whole approach since I hung up my own shingle in 2002 has been, the only reason I'm doing this work is to try to make it more easier and help you and leaders break through and be more successful. And I have continued to be just focused on that. I have not veered from that path. As 7 years ago, somebody asked me, what's your biggest fear about CX? And I said, it's actually what's happening now is that it becomes a shiny object. It follows the path of CRM in many ways, and that it's lots of people committing, lots of approaches coming out of the woodwork, but we're measuring it by action, activity, not necessarily true impact. So I really am focusing on leadership bravery, on working with leaders to really define the admirable acts and the admirable way that they're going to conduct themselves in business and enable their people to conduct themselves so that they'll earn that growth that is sustainable. And for me, that's my deal.
I love the new book. The new title says it all, and I love the tie-in to what you call admirable growth, because I think we've gone through a big cycle of growth for growth's sake. We've gone through a big cycle of quote unquote productivity gains, but we've seen what happens when that's faux productivity or faux growth, right? Like the everything from the wages to the actual impacts.
Right, and to grab the book. Yeah.
And so, we're going to be forced into, I believe this with my heart, I think we're going to be forced into a 10-year period of polarizing where you do fail, and brands that people have seen forever just go away. And it'll be slowly, then suddenly, like you'll go, wait, I thought they were doing well. And then next quarter, they're gone. And
I think the decision-making lens that people have for who they're going to buy from or work with is getting more and more specific, based on our own values, based on how we want to be treated, based on how we've been treated. And I've hitched my wagon to that because I'm convinced. And the new Trust Brand Survey just came out, and it's so galvanizing and so powerful that this is a true way to grow. And I think the admirable part of it too is it creates a spirit of prosperity inside of organizations that yields financial prosperity. And for me in my career, I would love to that's really my focus at this point.
Well, I can't recommend people getting in touch with you enough. Make sure you get all the books, or at least the new one, and start there.
There's the new one. Did you do that for your mother?
I mean, you got to, if you don't have that on your bookshelf, that's like the coolest cover ever. I thought the dog cover was cool years ago, but that's the best cover ever.
Well, and the other thing, if I could just be creepy for a second, the other thing is I tried to make this book really, really approachable, again, because we're having a hard time breakthrough. I hired a cartoonist. We have 32 case studies, and each one starts with a cartoon that all of us can relate to. I give people permission to copy them, use them in huddles, and then, like the dog book, and this is the galley version, so it's not as clean. The case study is only one page, and then you've got a mom lens to use in your huddle in the organization. And then the last chapter, the quiz, summarizes all with a Make Mom Proud-O-meter at the bottom.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I really tried to make it approachable, because it's just become this huge thing. So sorry about that.
No, that's well deserved. So I appreciate you being on. I know everyone else does. Thanks guys for tuning in. For all that did hang on, we had 100% attendance, so we didn't suck. Jeanne, that's good. So thank you.
That's great.
And we'll see you guys next time. And Jeanne, they can follow you at Customer Bliss.
At Jeanne Bliss on Twitter, and Jeanne at customerbliss.com. I married a guy named Bliss. How lucky is that? So awesome. Customerbliss.com. My new website is coming out probably March with the whole admirable growth thing. So stay tuned for that. There's lots. We'll make
sure we push that through our social media when we do. Thanks for being on. Cool. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next time.